As if you and your family haven't been through enough living through the pandemic in the US for the past 4 years and coming back home through quarantine, your wife's got caught up in the Perth lockdown. Tell us what's happened.
Yes, Chris, we've gone from one extreme to the other. My wife was unfortunate enough to be on that plane coming from Perth to Melbourne last week, where the COVID positive passenger was there. And anyway, and so we heard that the news broke on the Friday morning. And my wife looked at me and we said, "Oh, what do we do now?" So she went to a drive-in test to get a test, and then she isolated in a room of our house. We got no guidance from health department until about 6 p.m. that night, when a text came through saying she should self-isolate. But they didn't say anything about what I should do or my son should do or other people in the house. And it was not for another 24 hours. That's on the Saturday night. That's 3 days after the actual flight. That we got the first call from a health department official, and they said that your son and your husband cannot leave the house. In other words, we were all effectively under the house arrest. So we're just trying to follow the rules, but it was very complicated. And the very next morning, 2 health officials knocked on our door, and I asked them the same question. They said, "Oh no, you're fine to be out in the community. It's just your wife who has to stay in the room." Now that was the first of 2 big miscommunications.
It's so frustrating. I went through something similar in South Australia last year, because obviously you're trying to do the right thing. Even though you know in your heart of hearts that you're not infected and you've been tested, you want to do the right thing, because the last thing you want to be is the person who spreads an infection to your family or whatever. Yet you can't get clarity or consistency from the bureaucracies trying to tell you what to do.
We couldn't get any clarity whatsoever, Chris. So what we did is we stayed still. You put your life effectively on hold, just waiting. And then on the next night, that's a Sunday night, so we're now talking 4 days after the flight, okay, we get a phone call with the extraordinary news, to us anyway, that they said that what had appeared okay previously, her isolating in a room fully, with an ensuite and doing everything properly, was no longer good enough. If she wants to keep doing that, then myself and my son would have to isolate for 14 days as well in the house with her. In other words, that our son would miss out on school. So she reluctantly said, "Well, that's not a choice, really. I'll have to go into quarantine," because the other thing is she had to go into quarantine if she wasn't willing to put up with that. And so anyway, what happened was we arranged to do quarantine very reluctantly. They booked the bus, and the next day, Monday morning, the bus is on the way. She gets a call from another health official who says, "That's not true. No, you can quarantine in the house. That's allowed." So we cancelled the bus. An hour later, another health official calls.
Oh, no.
Said, "That's not true. You have to quarantine, or all 3 of you are in the house." I mean, we had no idea what was happening. I mean, clearly the health department officials, Chris, were not on the same page themselves as far as the regulations go. So how on earth are normal people supposed to follow it?
Well, it's just terrible. You need that consistency. But you've been mucked around so much. But in the end, is your wife now in hotel quarantine for 2 weeks?
She's in hotel
even
quarantine.
Though Perth's not locked down anymore?
Exactly. I mean, she took another test. So she's had 2 tests, 2 negative tests. I mean, I took a test too. Everyone's trying to be as careful as they could. I think with that plane, 250 people, it's now a week ago, not a single person has tested positive. So it's obviously not a super spreader event in any form. But
Yeah.
clearly there's a lot of bureaucracy involved here. So I don't think there's going to be any change. So she's in there for another week. Look, I really make the point here. I'm not complaining about, everyone wants to do the right thing with COVID regulations. So it's not a complaint in that respect. It's just an astonishment on my part, Chris, that after what Victoria went through last year, that they still haven't got their ducks in order. And it was a dog's breakfast. It really was what happened to us.